everybody doing? Good? You're here? We took the early bus home last night, so because we wanted to be prepared for you.
We did. It's nice to see so many people here, though, after that.
I know.
Right? That's good.
I know. Well, I'm Ann Mezzenga, as Jason mentioned.
And I'm Chris Walton.
And we're the co-hosts of Omni Talk Retail. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're currently the #1 podcast in retail right now. So thank you.
Ooh, thank you.
Yes, because of people like you all in the audience who have been following us. So thanks so much. Thanks to RetailSpaces for having us here today. As Jason said, we're recording a live podcast. So right now, if you can just once again give one more round of applause for the team at RetailSpaces and so that everyone listening at home knows what a great crowd we have in here. All right, well, today we have an exceptional treat for those of you who are here live in the audience and those who are listening at home. We're going to speak with two of the very best retailers right now and find out how they are driving growth while maintaining innovation, which is going to be a really great topic, and we'll get some good insights from each of them. First, we're going to invite Schnucks VP of Design, Construction, and Maintenance, David Carey, to the stage. Welcome, David. After David gets a chance to sit down here, we're gonna have a quick conversation with David, about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we're going to have Dan Gavin, ALDI's VP of National Real Estate, mic'd up. We'll get him up here. We'll share his thoughts, and then at the end, we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes for all of you to ask questions. So jot them down as we're going through the conversation. But Chris, I think we should get started.
Do you want to get started? I think we should too, Ann. All right. Well, David, again, Schnucks, David Carey, thanks for joining us. For those listening at home, tell us a bit about yourself. What is your background, and what the thing that's always interesting for us when we talk to people in your field is what does your role all entail?
So background's a little interesting. Never really intended to get into retail architecture.
Okay.
I graduated from the University of Arkansas with my bachelor's degree and went to work for a firm that was doing Walmart expansions in the mid-'90s. At that point, about 5 years later, I found out I was working for Walmart. 10 years with them, spent some time with Best Buy.
Okay.
And then I went out and kind of did my own thing, some merger and acquisitions in the civil engineering world, IT consulting. Wound up back at Walmart doing construction, store planning, wound up actually working for Walmart IT for a number of years, doing project management for them, and then got the call to go to Schnucks, so I get to bring it all together there. Our team basically is end to end. We manage everything from real estate, site selection, all the way through to maintenance, and if we have the disposition of any projects. So.
Okay. All right. So lots of Walmart in that history.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Walmart, yes.
A lot of Walmart.
22 years, a couple of different stints.
How many stints?
Two.
Okay. Got it. All right. Two tours.
Well, David, we have gone on record saying that Schnucks is the most innovative grocer in America right now. Everything that you guys have done, from robots roaming the store floors to electronic shelf labels. Can you share with the audience a little bit about what goes into innovation and really replicating that store by store in your role at Schnucks? How do you partake with that team?
So our team really serves two roles from the innovation standpoint. So first off, it's a very supporting role. So when IT comes up with an idea or the operators come up with an idea, our job is to figure out how to make that physical space work with the ideas that they come up with. A lot of times it's simple, like, where are you going to put power? What kind of power do you need? Other times it's how do we relay out an entire bakery or deli to come up with, to meet the needs that they're trying to do from an operational standpoint. So, and then we get in on the innovation side ourselves for like our Eat Well market and then our Schnucks Fresh concepts.
Okay.
Those were ground up concepts since I've actually been there. So we brand new developments that we got to work on to bring something different to our customer base, things that they've been asking for, and then roll the tech side into it as well to really try some new things.
So talk to us a little bit about that. So let's maybe take the robots and electronic shelf labels. You mentioned dropping power. What all was involved as you try to put those into market?
So it was really, as you step back and look at it, you've almost got to take a holistic approach. We've talked previously about how our formats are all a little bit different. So you got to take one of these holistic concepts like electronic shelf label and say, okay, how does this apply and roll out to a 115 store chain that is pretty varied across its layout and footprint. Tally, our robot, was a little simpler. It was really where are you going to find a home for him?
Yeah.
And then, where are you going to get the power for him? But there's little things that you don't think about when you're doing that. So, obviously pandemic hits, you start changing your hours of operation, you start shutting down lights, and then you realize, wait, Tally needs light.
Right.
So there's those types of things that you have to take into consideration as well when you're rolling out the tech. It's really has to be a holistic approach that we have to bring to it from our side.
Got it.
Is there anything that really stands out that was a challenge more than others outside of making sure that you have the lights on it?
For us, Tally rolled out before I joined the company. I've been there 21 months now. So
21 months.
But the shelf labels were really interesting because it was part of our holistic approach to how we're going to roll out our remodel program and how we're going to affect all of our stores. And the ESLs kind of took on a life of their own. So they became their own independent project. And it then really became the coordination of, okay, if we're relaying a store and we know we've got a team that's going to go out and do shelf labels, making sure we don't relay after they've done the shelf labels. It's something as simple as how do you modify your remodel program and your phasing to make sure you have the teams lined out where you're not duplicating work.
Which, and I know Ann's going to ask you about how you allocate capital to accomplish that, because I know you guys have a very specific way that you've already kind of alluded to. But before we do that too, one of the questions that Ann and I want to get out on the table right away is, we oftentimes in our travels, we always hear, and there's some of you that were at a conference where you probably heard this that were in the audience, but we always hear that, Schnucks is able to go fast because they're not a private company. If they were a public company, they wouldn't be able to do all this innovation, yada, yada, yada. What's your take on that?
I think that's really an oversimplification of it.
You do? Why?
I really don't believe going fast and having worked for private and publicly held companies, it's really more about culture and process and procedure, much more so than whether you have to account to a shareholder or not. For us, it's culture. Right now, it's part of our values. It's one, try new things is right in our values. So all this innovation comes naturally. It's just part of who we are, and it's all part of how we collaborate as a unit to make sure we're delivering our customers and teammates what they need.
So it's about having the right ideas and the right people in place to put those ideas into action.
Yeah, and also creating a big circle of trust, because when you try new things, not everything works. Right. You're going to have moments where things don't go as planned or things don't really function the way you want them to, and then you got to be able to create that circle of trust where people are still willing to innovate. So as they keep bringing stuff to the table, if something goes bad and everybody goes a less than positive route, it can stifle that innovation, and that's not something you want to do. So.
Right, that's a good point.
Sounds like a very, very much a cultural thing too.
It is very cultural, yes.
Well, Chris alluded to this earlier, but how do you go so fast then, David? And how are you allocating capital to allow your teams to move at the speed at which you do?
Our speed really comes from our collaboration. I think that's one of the things that really helps us with our culture. We're, smaller, we're 115 stores centralized there, Metro St. Louis and up through Illinois, into Wisconsin and some in Indiana. But we've got a really tight-knit group. And the way we respond is we listen to our customers a lot. We're really proud of the fact that we're close to our communities with our stores, and we get a lot of feedback, good and bad, but you get a lot of feedback. And a lot of those will turn into requests. So what we've really been trying to do is refine the process which those requests come to us, so as we can make sure we've got transparency across the organization, which then drives that collaboration. The more people know about it, the more people can talk about it. The more people talk about it, the more problems we wind up solving before they get deployed.
And is that how do you then assign capital to those kind of requests, or how does that work?
So capital really comes in as a really holistic approach. At the beginning of the year, we know what we want to spend. We've got a target we want to go towards. And you set those, but you've got to have the flexibility as new ideas come up, new things, to be able to flex and move that capital around to those right initiatives. So it's being very holistic in how we approach our capital spend. And making sure that we're deploying the right things at the right time in the right way is really important.
But you kind of mentioned it before, and I want to talk a little bit more about it too. You said there's the standard lines on the project roadmap, right? And you put things to the side and you look at them differently. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so as you're going into our remodel program, the unique thing is because we have so many different formats, we have to approach things from a kit of parts. And so as we approach that, you're working in certain areas, you phase your projects, you flow your projects, and then somebody gets an idea for some new innovation. They want to roll it out, they want to pilot and test it. Remodels seem to be a great target for piloting and testing because we're already there. We've already got the teams on the ground doing all the electrical and the infrastructure work. So then what you're able to do is really adapt. You may have to change your flow. You may have to extend your duration. You may have to make some of those types of changes. But the idea is that cross collaboration of all the departments really focusing into that remodel. One of the things you got to think about on the remodels is really the fact that you're focused. You're in somebody's house. You're in an operator's house. You're in a customers really, they think the store's theirs. So when you're moving stuff around and you're doing those types of things and you're telling them what's going to happen and then you have to change, that communication on, hey, we're doing something a little bit different is really critical.
But from an ROI perspective, are you looking at the overall remodel differently than say the ESL project portion of it too, or the robot portion of it too?
Well, ESLs wound up being a standalone capital.
Standalone.
It got it was looked at what is ROI based on deployment of the ESLs.
Okay.
We do that with a lot of initiatives.
Okay.
To make sure that they're standalone, that they're going to support themselves.
Okay.
And then the remodels have to kind of have their own legs to stand on as well when you go out and do those. So it's really bringing the two different worlds together as part of a remodel.
Got it. Okay, that's great.
David, who's at the table now when you're having those conversations about what technology you're going to include in the remodels and in the new store build outs? Like, is that different than it was, excuse me, a couple of years ago?
It really varies on the initiative that's getting rolled out. So you've got if it's a pure tech kind of behind the scenes thing, then it's us and IT working together.
Yeah.
If it starts to involve our operators or how we interface with our customers, you get more and more people at the table to have those conversations. Again, it's really about vetting out and trying to look forward to all the things that could go wrong.
Right.
And cutting those off before they happen.
Like a stoic, maybe.
Yes.
Very stoic approach is a really good way to look at it.
Assessing what could go wrong before it happens. All right, so one of the things that could probably go wrong in your job is you don't really have a prototype.
Do not.
Like do you even have two stores that are close together? I'm curious. But
we do have similar formats from acquisitions over the years, yes.
So how does that affect your job relative to other, like Walmart as an example is probably a good comparison. Like how is your job different here than it would be at Walmart where it's more prototypical?
Well, when you start talking about prototypes, a lot of people think about greenfield stores. They think about, okay, it's this box, it's got these things inside of it, and we're just going to go stamp it out. Where for us, we've grown over 85 years. We've grown through new stores, but we've grown a lot through acquisition. And really then it's stepping back and saying, okay, how do we define what is the best of the best for a bakery? What's that sweet spot in a bakery? Type of equipment, size of department, linear foot of display, and utilizing all the data to say, okay, this is what our bakery should look like. And then how do you have to adapt that to each of your locations that may or may not be exactly the same? You may have to change your backroom configuration a little bit, but you always have to keep in mind that teammate flow and that operational flow because it's all about serving the customers, and the more efficiently they can do that, the better the experience on the customer side.
So do you have any tips or tricks for managing through the various prototypes that you are having to deal with every day?
Patience. But really it's knowing your data, and we lean into data-driven design and decision-making a lot. So knowing the data and knowing how to interpret it so you can get to those right decisions, it will actually lead you to a lot of the answers. You don't have to go create them.
Well, David, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about convenience. Schnucks has done single line queuing. You have an app where you can pre-order your sliced deli meats. It's wonderful. Now you're piloting smart carts in your stores.
Yes.
I have to ask, from an operator's perspective, from a construction store design perspective, what challenges does that bring from your side of things, thinking about how you make that as convenient for your customers as the other tactics?
So from the design side, it was how do we work with our operators and the IT team? Because caper carts came forward out of our relationship with Instacart.
Okay.
And so the IT team brought it forward. And, and the caper cart it's a smart cart.
Yeah.
So for customers, it's really intuitive. You go about your normal shopping, you drop items into the cart. It knows what you dropped in the cart. It weighs your produce. It does all those, and it will kind of give you recommendations to help you find savings and also track what you're spending as you go, which is for customers is in this day and age is a big thing. What am I spending? How am I spending it?
Right.
But from the design side, it was really about where do we find a place to house it, because these carts don't nest with your normal carts. They need charging stations. So how do you get the power to those charging stations? Where are you going to put it to drive the engagement? Where are you going to put it so is easy, because it's a little bit different operationally for the stores. Sure. How are they going to operate it and service it and those types of things? And then you get really into change management too, which is from a maintenance standpoint, the stores are used to calling or putting in a service ticket to one place. This is a little bit different. Where do you put that request into? So you got to take all those things into consideration to make sure we're educating all the different groups on how to operate them.
Weather, what happens.
They do. They handle weather really well,
That's
actually.
That's good to hear.
That's true, though. The maintenance call on the cart's wheel is broken is a little bit different when the smart cart's not working.
Absolutely, yeah. Or, hey, the screen's not working.
Right.
The gentleman we normally deploy to fix a cart would be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different experience set, right, that's required. All right, well, let's get you out of here on this, and then we'll get Dan up on the stage to join you, which I'm super excited about. The other topics that are of growing importance, it seems like, across the retail industry are shrink and sustainability. What advice do you have for the audience or our listeners in terms of the things you've seen work well to help ameliorate the effects of those two issues?
I guess the best advice I could give is you have to really take a holistic approach. Take shrink, for example. There's multiple aspects from a grocery standpoint that roll into shrink, whether it's operational efficiencies, whether it's pitch, whether it's retail theft.
Right.
And if taking pitch for an example, as you look at a fresh department, it's working with your merchants and your VP heads of departments going, how do we right size the department where we still make the full offering that our customers want, but at the same time, we're not over allocating the space. Therefore, we're putting too much. Retailer, we fill space up. If we have space, we will fill it.
Right.
So from that standpoint, it's how do you get that right size so we can really provide that customer experience, the products they want, but not over provide. And we're providing the right things at the right time. Drive time. Do we have the rotisserie chickens? Do we have those types of things?
Right.
And making sure that we've got the spaces to support that effort. That's really where the design team comes in. And then, sustainability. We're trying some different things. We've deployed solar panels in Edwardsville. We're talking with different companies about doing some load shedding during high demand times for our warehouse facilities, because it's a little easier there than it is in our store facilities. But it's also, the less you pitch, the more sustainable you are.
Yeah.
How do we handle our LED lighting? How do we handle after hours when we're stocking? What levels of lighting do we actually need? Those types of things. So it's really a holistic approach, and as you solve one, you have to keep the other in mind. You don't really, putting them in silos doesn't tend to work. You really want them to be holistic as you approach it.
That's a great point to end on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think about the whole product conception of the Schnucks environment in the store, and you make one move here, it could impact something else there, and you've got to always keep that in balance. So
absolutely,
it's a great point to end on. All right, let's bring up Dan.
Let's bring up Aldi's VP of Real Estate, Dan Gavin, to the stage. Dan, welcome up.
Morning.
Good morning. Well, Dan, we're gonna start with the same question that we just asked David. VP of National Real Estate. What all does that job title
You got a
include?
big job.
Yeah. What are you doing? There's a few things that have been in the news lately. Yeah.
Picking up a few hobbies.
Yes. Yes.
At ALDI, we were decentralized for many years in the real estate sector. 2016, we made a decision that we would start the process of centralization. So I took on this role in 16. And really, we've been building up to what we're at today. So there's basically kind of like David, end-to-end. We call it invest to divest. So everything from not only site identification, but really site analysis, looking at our growth potential in the U.S. Where can we build out our portfolio? Where's the white space? Where's the markets that we can put additional stores? So my analytics team does that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Obviously, I have a team all across the U.S., deal makers that are out there finding the sites, looking at locations, making the deal. Our real estate team is a little bit different because we see all the way through construction, but then I also have facility maintenance, like David. That's relatively new to the department. But again, we keep evolving and growing and saying, this is the right thing. It's a real estate asset. Real estate should take care of it. Service, obviously, the operational side of life, but we really soup the nuts. And we are a little bit busy, like you said.
Yes, 800 stores, right?
Yeah, that's what the CEO said. So,
Yeah.
Really, we've always had a 5YP projection of new stores. We've been averaging probably 115 to 120 stores a year. It's been so 805 years is a little more aggressive. Obviously, that's aided by our recent announcement of acquiring Southeast Grocers. So about 400 sites that Winn-Dixie and the Harvey's banner that we are acquiring. The Fresco y Mas banner that they owned was sold off to Sedano's. So those 400 stores will go through a really keen analysis of which stores should be converted fully to Aldi, and then which we'll keep as Winn-Dixie or Harvey's and maintain that banner as well. So we're deep into it. We think it's going to be a 3-year process to start converting, and so we're excited. A lot of work to do. We're reshaping my department to handle that kind of work because it's going to be aggressive. But,
like new roles, or what do you, when you say reshaping, what does that mean?
So we deployed some people to do some very specialized things. So, dealing with all these landlords, right? As we convert. So we put one person, you're solely in charge of all the legal issues, dealing with the landlords. Another person, you're going to be in charge of all equipment, where typically each person would do that themselves. But there's going to be so many rinse and repeats. We thought, let's just dedicate people to single roles and try to pull this thing off. On top of, 125 organic new stores that we're growing, all across the U.S. Already. So a lot happening. So it's been exciting.
So let's rewind that a little bit. Make sure we bring everyone up in the room up to speed on what you've got going on, because it is a hell of a lot. And as well as for those listening at home, let's bring them up to speed too. So really, there's 2 things going on, right? You've announced a pretty aggressive new store growth plan, particularly in the West Coast, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've also just recently made the big acquisition that you already mentioned. So talk to us a little bit about that. From your vantage point in your role, how do you think about those 2 things? Are they separate? Are they alike? What's different about them? You can start wherever you want, but how would you sum that up for us?
Let's start with the organic, our natural growth that we've been doing. Again, that's all over the U.S. The West obviously is a big growth market for us. We have land in Goodyear, Arizona, for our 27th distribution center. We're new to the Arizona market. I think we only have 12 stores right now in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Those will be serviced right now out of our California division, but growth module definitely in Arizona. But then the East Coast is phenomenally successful for us right now. Post-pandemic, things really turned positive for Aldi out there, and a lot of double-digit growth, same-store sales out in the East. So we've got more opportunity. A lot of mouths to feed, yet in the U.S. Aldi is a lot of the presenters were talking about yesterday that people that are switching brands or loyalty. A lot of people have found Aldi in these last 4 to 5 years. But even before that, our brand kind of reimaging has been happening since 16, when we refreshed from 16 to 22, 1,600 stores. So that's a part of it. So the new store growth all over the U.S. is exciting. It's obviously a much longer development timeline,
longer cycles,
than going in and buying 400 stores and acquiring those sites already for us. And of the new stores that we do, we do ground ups. There's a photo of a ground up store. We do inline leases. We'll do land leases, that type of thing. So those development cycles, depending on what part of the country you're in, is very different. Miami, 4 years to get a store open. Midwest Iowa, I can get one done in maybe 20 months. So it's a big difference. When it comes to Southeast, obviously the pace that we'll be able to grow and get these stores converted is going to be phenomenal. We think once we get this conversion plan organized, we'll go in, get permitting, shut her down. 20 weeks later, we can probably be back open as a full-fledged Aldi, and you'll never know it was a Winn-Dixie.
Yeah. So going back to the question that we asked David too, so the new store growth kind of more prototypical for you, right? It's kind of rinse and repeat. You just get it done. You know the process. May take a little longer, at the end of the day, but you're kind of comfortable there. So am I right in thinking that the acquisition and getting those stores up to speed and getting them in the Aldi banner, that provides a little more
Sure.
sleepless nights, let's say, so to speak?
As David said, their company grew through acquisition. Well, that's how Winn-Dixie grew too. They grew through acquisition. They've also, shrunk through several different transactions. So their stores are all over the board. I mean, they've got from 30,000 up to 80,000. Obviously, we're not going to open an 80,000 square foot Aldi store. So fitting our stores in is going to be unique.
Right.
They also have, we also acquired their 180 Winn-Dixie liquor stores, which most of them are adjacent to or contained in the box of the Winn-Dixie. So we've got to work with, where do we position that banner? Do we keep it in the same location, move it to a different part of the box? So just a lot of pre-planning. There was no playbook on my shelf that I could go to and say, oh, how do we do this?
Right.
So we're really thinking through it, and it's been probably been 15 months. This process has been ongoing through the acquisition before we signed, and then of course, get through all of the approvals to get this done.
And are you trying to get them to a prototype situation, or is it like more the kit of parts like Jason talked about yesterday? Like, how are you approaching that?
To our customers, we want the sales floor to feel like any other Aldi store.
Okay.
The facades will probably look like some Winn-Dixies, but we'll dress them up to use some of our materials and some of our brand elements and that type of thing. But we're not going to get into major structural changes on the facades. But once you're inside, our customers will know this is an Aldi store, just like the one down the street that may have been a ground up or what have you. So that's our goal.
Dan, are you looking at any other executions in store, as you're talking about like the adjacent liquor stores, or going into a Winn-Dixie that was 80,000 square feet and a typical Aldi is what, like
22?
22, right. So how do you think about that extra space and what you do with that?
Yeah, it's not our plan right now to do anything unique in those stores. I mean, we've got 2,350 stores today, so to say we're going to go and do something unique just in those markets, it's just not who we are.
Right. Okay.
It's not our culture. So obviously we have ambitions to put up a demising wall and sublease or find some other retailers that are looking to grow as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the plan.
My phone's been ringing. Let's just say that.
I can only imagine.
Anybody need some space? Give me a call.
What about on the employee side? Like, how do you think, how does that impact you, number one, and then how are you thinking about that overall at Aldi as you try to bring these new stores into the fold?
Yeah, my plate was pretty full before this. It's challenging, but exciting. The company's put some good resources to this project. Obviously, it's we've only acquired one other chain back in 2016. We bought Bottom Dollar, which is about 60 stores in the Mid-Atlantic area. So this is very unique, but it's a very important initiative. In Florida, mainly Winn-Dixie, probably of the 400 stores, probably 300 of them are in Florida. It's a huge market for us. We already have 2 distribution centers down there, and the population of Florida just keeps growing.
Yeah.
So big opportunity. But we're really concerned about the employees of Winn-Dixie.
Okay.
Really making a concerted effort to really, as we fold their company into ours, making sure they're well informed. There's consistent messaging. We want people to work for Aldi. They're not losing jobs. We're super excited to try to convert as many people as possible to Aldi employees. Then, of course, like I said, the stores we choose not to convert, obviously they'll remain Winn-Dixie. But it's really important to us to maintain those people and be committed to them. People are super important at Aldi. It's a unique organization. I've been there 37 years.
Wow.
And it's an organization that really prides itself on how we take care of our people.
Dan, I have one more question for you before we go on to the next section. Instacart does a lot of delivery for Aldi. Are there any considerations as you're building out these new locations to support, these third-party drivers needing like assembly space in the store? Like, how do you kind of think about that? Or are your teams just kind of like, it's working as it is, we keep it?
Yeah, it is working as just fine the way it is. We do have an e-com sector in the store for both our, curbside pickup.
Right.
So they could use that. Right now they don't, but that's the space that we've been dedicating.
Okay.
So we've been trying to future-proof our stores probably back since 2020, putting in that space. And we have curbside, I think, in about 1,800 of our locations. So we found space either in the back room or on the sales floor or something. So we are conscious of that.
Yeah.
But it's the space is there if they need it.
Right. Excellent. Well, let's talk about sustainability. We asked David about this too. Is driving sustainability more challenging in some of these sites that you've acquired versus new builds, I'd imagine? Or how do you kind of think about that, and what's Aldi's approach to sustainability in design and build?
Sustainability is definitely important. Being a European-owned company, just like IKEA was mentioning yesterday, our roots and our shareholders, our owners really believe in sustainability. So in the U.S., it's a challenge.
Yeah.
A little bit different than in Europe. I mean, there's a lot of technologies that we just don't have here, or technologies that are affordable here. So we are very keen to all things sustainable. We started back in 2016 really experimenting with CO2 refrigeration in our effort to really minimize our reliance on Freon. And we now have 700 stores that are EPA Platinum Green Shield certified with CO2.
Okay.
Not bragging, but I think we have more stores than all other retailers put together. So CO2 is big. We have solar on about 80% of our distribution centers. Over 200 stores have solar and growing. But when it comes to new stores versus these transition stores, it's complicated in both.
Yeah.
Is it?
What things have, like, in each scenario bring you challenges?
The big problem with the SEG acquisition is the climate.
Okay.
Florida, hot, humid, Louisiana, Georgia, it's not real conducive to CO2 refrigeration. So we're using propane down there, which is a challenge. It is more expensive. And the bigger challenge is really post-opening. And that's and installation, right? The technicians just aren't there yet. They're not skilled. The technicians in the refrigeration world are a little bit old school. So getting those things maintained and installed properly are a challenge. So we've really invested a lot with the Hill Phoenixes of the world, the Hussmans of the world, to train and educate the technicians that are out in the field. But that's a big thing for us. To continue to move to those type technologies, heating and cooling. We're trying to, just like IKEA mentioned yesterday, we're trying to find new advances there. So a lot going on in that sector.
Right.
Well, that's pretty crazy to me. So like the old merchant in me, when I think prototype, right, I think of like, oh, the space layout's the same. But there's all this stuff, behind the walls and everything that isn't prototypical because of what state you're probably operating in and what the climate is and the temperature is there, right? Am I thinking about that the right way?
Absolutely. Well, then you get the municipalities that have their say-so or
their goals, sustainability
their goals,
goals,
and you try to be good. And you try to put solar, and then you got cities fighting you on solar, or you got utility companies pushing back that they don't want you to have solar, or they limit the size of the solar grid that you put up on a distribution center. So it's just challenging. Everybody, we want these things as a society, I believe, but at the end of the day, there's just a lot of hurdles.
Right.
A lot of hurdles.
And the merchants don't know everything either. I think that's the key takeaway here, right? I'm sure there's many people in the audience that will agree with that. All right, so we had a lively discussion with you about this when we met you a couple weeks ago. So similar question that we asked David. Theft and shrink. What have you found that works for Aldi in terms of limiting the impact of that, and what is actually cost effective for you as well?
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm an old operator. I mean, I grew up in the business through operations, so even though I have more focus on design, when the operations team came to me on installation of self-checkouts.
Right.
They had their vision, they had their idea, and I looked at it on paper and I was like, that doesn't make sense to me, and here's why. And they fought me. It's like, oh, but productivity and efficiency, and we know Aldi is super sensitive to labor and cost and those types of things. But I just said, but shrink. I mean, that's going to have an impact on shrink the way you've got that laid out. And I lost the battle. That's okay.
To the merchants?
To the merchants. That's fine. I said, well, okay, we'll build a few. Let's test it out and pilot it. And we'll say maybe a year later, they came knocking and said, could we text some of your ideas that you had, because we think it's a better. So, when it comes to shrink, it was really all about the corral concept and the containment of the customers and how they're shopping through that queue, and how the supervision or the attendant's going to oversee that. So those are some things that I can impact. Obviously, we work with our risk team and security team on our installs and the design and that type of thing. But yeah, I guess that's what I would mention right here is the SCO layout is quite interesting.
Right. And all jokes aside, like, it's still a work in progress, right? Like, you guys have, and that was one thing I took from our previous conversations, like, you guys haven't really found the answer yet. You're still trying to figure out what that happy balance is. And does that matter depending on the prototype in the store and the volume? Or, like, how do you think about that?
I mean, because our stores aren't that big. So even putting in and finding the room to put in the self-checkouts was a challenge.
Right.
And then they've got some ideas on how they want to lay things up. There's a lot of new technology coming on SCOs, right? With facial recognition or, scan the ticket to get out of the gated area, whatever the case might be.
Right.
And they have a lot of ambitions, but, I'm like, the store is only so big, and our front ends aren't that big. I mean, a typical Aldi store has 5 or 6 registers. So fitting that in is a challenge, much like David was saying, is these new initiatives are great, but where am I going to put it?
Yeah.
And in 22,000 square feet, there's not a lot of space.
How are you thinking about that from like a future-proof design thinking?
Yeah, my team is always looking to value engineer our building, but also, to your point, future-proof. We're not ready to commit to EV charging yet in our parking lots, but we're future-proofing ourselves by already laying, the piping and, where's the transformer going to go if we have to do it, those types of things. So we are looking at that stuff. So it's a constant discussion.
Just a phased approach.
Yep.
Getting it ready. Well, looking back on kind of everything that we've talked about today, David identified that part of Schnucks' success is really being able to kind of give everybody a seat at the table, establish processes, and a group that really can figure out how to make decisions quickly. Does Aldi have anything like that, or do you feel like Aldi has unique processes or technologies that you've deployed to kind of help keep things in order within the organization, especially from like a capital investment standpoint and how that influences that?
Aldi's a little bit unique. Being a global organization, we have a lot of processes internationally.
Okay.
So I sit on our international real estate committee, our international sustainability committee. I also oversee procurement at Aldi, so I sit on our international procurement committee. So we do a lot of collaboration globally, and a lot of that goes into the planning. From a capital standpoint, that's more U.S. led. So obviously, I sit on the board of the new SEG group that will be reporting into Aldi. But I wouldn't say there's anything unique. I will say they're mostly homegrown processes.
Yes.
Being privately held, we tend to keep it that way.
Yes. It works for you.
Right.
So I'm curious too, like, so you get wind of these massive expansion plans. Like, do you like, what goes through your head? Do you have to be like, okay, I need to start thinking about how I'm going to do this work differently? Or do you feel confident enough in the processes you already had in place to be able to handle it all? So how have you changed your approach to your job to be as successful as you can be to make sure that this acquisition and expansion plan works?
Yeah, I would. I really liked what Ryan said the other day when he had the image up of the rock in the ocean. And, my people look at me all the time and they're like, how are you staying so calm? I'm like, well, there's not much of a choice, right?
Right.
The company has an ambition.
Right.
We're part of that. We should be proud that they've tasked us with that. They have confidence in us. So, you just got to keep moving.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we do have a pretty replicable process. I'm very confident our team will pull it off. So it doesn't get me too rattled. And like I said, we've had some time to plan. My leadership CEO gave me the resources I need to get it done, and we're excited to accept the challenge.
So for you, if I go back to the Ryan Stoicism thing, and for those listening, we had a great conversation about Stoicism here when the show opened on Sunday. So you're saying your approach has been more of, hey, we've been practicing this, we're ready, the game is here, it's time for us to do the best we can, versus like the other approach, which we also heard on Sunday night, which was, okay, what new actions do I need to take? What new ways do I need to adapt to the challenges in front of me? It's more the former than the latter for you.
Yeah, but like I said, we did redeploy people's work. So they're going to do a little more specialization for the next 2 to 3 years. But we do have a really good process in place that we're comfortable with. And I'm very confident that we'll get it knocked out.
Awesome. We can't wait to see what unfolds, because it's going to be a hell of a big plan, man, and good luck to you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's open it up to the audience for questions now. We'll take Q&A. Who's got a question for these two gentlemen?
Well, Dan, in terms of sustainability, you're saying like all the obstacles, and then especially compared to Europe, who is so much more advanced, when do you think, or do you think, that sooner or later the message is going to come across that if we're not here, cost is probably not going to matter? Do you think that's going to come across when all the forests burn down and
Wah, wah.
I mean, cost, it matters. That's why I said the technology and the affordable technology today, it just isn't here. We are behind Europe, in our case, probably 8 to 10 years from what they're doing over there. We have an ambition that we're trying to meet their expectations, but, globally, we've made some announcements of what our sustainability goals are. There's going to be some areas in the U.S. that I just can't meet it because the technology doesn't work. So we have to have a few carve-outs. But if we can get to 90% of the ambition, then I think we've done a really good job. Yeah. So it's, and we have a plan to change out all of our refrigeration systems, between now and 2035, and go to the natural refrigerants and those types of things. So we have a plan on top of the 800 stores that we're going to be touching the other 2,300 and trying to meet that goal. But in the U.S., it's going to be a tough road.
Yeah. David, how do you think about that question from your perspective?
I always look at it from a right or wrong from an ROI standpoint. I think whether you're privately held or publicly held, to stay in business and serve your customers, you still got to look at that ROI. So it's finding that right technologies that you can apply in the right way. Government tends to push you towards certain things sooner rather than later sometimes, but it's really about choosing the right tech for your application. Store format sizes, whether you use rack systems or protocols, or how do you making those types of decisions that's right for the space that you have, and then letting that, again, it goes back to that holistic approach. Sustainability comes, but you have to think about it. How does it function within the building? How does it work with what you do as a retailer versus just forcing something in that may or may not apply?
Well, and the government has a part too. In Europe, there's a lot of subsidies. Yeah. Which we don't have here.
That's right.
That makes it a little bit more affordable for them.
Yeah. We got another question back here.
Yeah, this question's for Dan. So we have retailers that are constantly repositioning, and that results in empty buildings, right? So I know Aldi's gone into some of these empty buildings. Is there one in particular or a brand that really works well with your format that you're like, we really like going into these old buildings?
As far as who we take over, who comes with us?
It could be takeover, but I'm thinking more of like maybe like a Fresh and Easy close down, or maybe like a Rite Aid or something.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, we really like the way that laid out. Worked really well for our brand.
Yeah, the Rite Aids don't work so much. They're 15,000, so we need the space. The Bed Bath & Beyonds were good for us. They fit really nicely. We've probably done a dozen of those already. Toys R Us was, again, kind of like a Winn-Dixie, double the size. We took down some of those. Lucky's down in Florida, we took down some of those that worked out pretty well. Again, excess space doesn't scare us. I have a excess property team that takes care of that, and we'll dispose of it or find a tenant. So, you know, we just need the 25,000 square feet. We can deal with it. There's no magic pill on who that is, but we just need the space.
I have a question for both of you too while we're waiting to see if the audience has anything else. You both have been working in this industry for a long time. You both now have your teams working pretty hard on things that don't really have a known out there, like 800 new stores. You're doing new innovations in the store all the time, rolling out things like caper carts. What advice do you have for the audience about how to continuously motivate your teams to get behind kind of these strategies that aren't so black and white? You're not just going in and rebuilding another store, using a kit of parts always that makes sense to everybody. Like, how are you keeping people curious and helping keep people in line and toward a common goal? And David, maybe we'll start with you.
So I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I know we had Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of it is start with why. It really is. It's explaining to your team as much as you can. Obviously, in our roles, we have conversations that you can't fully share. But being able to get with your team and explain why we're trying things or what we're doing or kind of the overall vision so they can see it and buy into it versus saying, we just got to go do this.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's what keeps them motivated. The more they understand, the more it becomes personal and relevant to them. And the more it's personal and relevant, the more they'll buy in and the effort that goes into it.
Yeah, I think for our team, it's pretty easy. We've got a lot on our plate, but it's super motivating to see our brand continue to grow into a national brand player. So the motivation is simple, but we really are trying to create a lot of ownership with the team and giving them that dedicated responsibility, knowing they're accountable to something. And I think it's I've always been a big believer trying to create that passion in people. And I've got the motivation is there because they see what we can do and really grow Aldi.
Yeah, like you said, your team was chosen to execute to do this, so there's some honor.
So I think it tells my team that our leaders have confidence in us. And to give us this challenge.
Right.
Yeah, and management's always easier when you're going with the water, moving downhill, than trying to push it uphill, right? Which is an important thing to think about. Like strategically, you got a lot of tailwind behind you. That probably makes your job a lot easier too.
Yeah. Well, I got to credit we like to call it the rock pile. The guys that are operating these stores. Yeah. Obviously, I'm there to serve them. I'm trying to create them and give them an asset that they can operate efficiently and effectively and profitably. So it's really a service mentality, I think, as well in what we do.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Got one more question over here.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, thanks, Dave and Dan, for participation at the roundtable yesterday. A lot of great insight there. So this question is more for Dan on the site selection side. Understanding that your white space analytics team kind of looking where you need to go. I thought interesting comment about Bed Bath & Beyond. Just curious how you weigh lease or purchase economics against site selection criteria, and kind of seeing, where we need to be in a market versus, potentially an attractive economic opportunity.
Yeah, real estate's a funny thing. Where you may want to put a store, there may not be anything available. We have a pretty complex analytics team that looks at opportunities of where we can put additional stores. Obviously, a lot of really smart people that work in that field, but trying to identify a site, and we have no really worries about whether it's a land lease, a lease, an acquisition. I mean, they all have a different financial model that we have to make sure meets our rates of return. But what type of transaction it is doesn't really doesn't matter. But it's really about the space. The location, relationship to competition, to other retailers, You know, we don't want to be off by ourselves. We want to be amongst all the rest of you guys. You know, that's where the shopping patterns are. That's where the people want to be. That's where we want to be. So hope that answers your question, but we're really transparent when it comes to what type of site it is.
Great.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
We got
So
one
we got
more.
one over here. They're rolling in now, man.
I know.
Got everybody warmed up.
Getting Jason his exercise in.
Yeah, right.
Really.
Cobwebs have been shaken off.
Good morning, all. This is a great podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
A question for both of you. As David, you spoke a bit about automation in the store, and Dan, you're talking about acquisition. How are you? And maybe you don't have your hand on it a lot, but you're certainly witness to it. How are you navigating the unions in both? I mean, it's a strong union in grocery, and I would guess that through the acquisition, Dan, that Winn-Dixie and Harvey's had a pretty strong union down there, as well as we know just from the automotive space and automation of a lot of things that the unions recently are having a lot to say about automating some of these stores. So as well as, like I said, the automotive space too. We're seeing that with electric cars in Detroit. So
I'll go first. Aldi is 2,350 stores, no unions. Winn-Dixie and Harvey's, no unions. No union down there. So they don't, no factor for us on that. Obviously, taking care of our people is important. And there's a purpose in why unions created many years ago, because companies were taking advantage of the employees. We fully believe in taking care of our employees. A full-time cashier in an Aldi store has the same benefits that I do. So we really believe in you know, the grocery retail is not a career for most people, but I think at Aldi we've got a lot of long-standing store employees because we take good care of them. So for us, you know, that's our vision is to not need a union because we're going to take care of our employees.
You know, for us, I mean, the markets we're in are heavy union. We've got strong relationships with a lot of the unions, so it's really about, again, going back to that education piece. If you're trying new processes and procedures in a department, it's not about cutting labor, it's about labor efficiency. It's about how do you serve the customer better. It's really approaching it from that standpoint and having that relationship with them. Even on our maintenance side, we have internal techs that we have on our team, and it's really, you treat them just like they're part of the team, they're part of the family, and you know, we're regardless of whether they're part of a union or not, we treat everybody the same, and then we go out and we execute as a group.
Yeah, and just personally, one of my favorite, we follow Schnucks a lot. We went down to St. Louis, we saw their flagship store, we saw the robot roaming around. We put a video of it up online. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it is.
So you can see it, but the funniest quote from that video was, I think the SVP of store ops, she was like, if I took this robot out of the store, the employees would kill me before I got out the door. They'd chase me out the door if I tried to take this robot out, because it helps that so much.
Tally's got a pretty strong cult following.
She does. She or he does. I don't even know. I have no idea.
Tally.
I don't
We
know.
just
Yeah,
call
it's
it Tally.
Tally. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's androgynous
Yeah,
robot.
right,
That's
right.
perfect. All right, any other questions? It's your last chance.
You know, one thing, I'd like to add one
go
thing
ahead.
on sustainability.
Great.
If you look at the Eat Well market we actually took over an old Babies R Us space.
Okay.
And I think that's something as retailers we need to think a lot about, is this adaptive reuse. Whether you're doing big acquisitions or you're looking to go into a market and it may not be a typical retail space, but how do we adaptive reuse a lot of the facilities that are out there? Because that's a huge sustainability. You may not be able to put all the latest sustainability tech into it, but you're doing a huge effort on the sustainability side. We can do adaptive reuse.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. Great point to end on.
Awesome. All right, going once, going twice. Any other questions? All right, great. Well, that wraps us up. Thank you both to David and Dan for joining us today. Let's give them a huge round of applause.